Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, starring Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Bing Rames, Simon Pegg, Issei Morales, Palm Clementif, Henry Czerny, Holt McCallany, Janet McTeer, Nick Offerman, Hannah Waddingham, and Angela Bassett, directed by Christopher McQuarrie. Now, before I get into this, welcome back to Mission Impossible. As I went back to the series a couple of times, one leading up to Fallout and the other one leading up to Dead Reckoning, that was officially part one, but not anymore. And now this movie's called The Final Reckoning, and I don't even know if this is going to be the final movie of the Mission Impossible series, but let's just get into it and see what I'm talking about. Let's get into it. We open with an image of the entity. Then we get to Ethan Hunt, returned by Tom Cruise, getting a message on a VHS tape from Madam President Erica Sloan, returned by Angela Bassett from Fallout, Mission Impossible Fallout otherwise, begging him to turn himself in with the key he captured at the end of the last movie. And we see old footage from the previous missions in the previous movies. And did I need to be reminded of those previous movies? Not really, but maybe people will. But this movie's already long at 2 hours and 49 minutes. But we move on to Ethan being on the run in, I'm thinking it's London, England. I could be wrong. Along with the dying Luther Stickle, returned by Ving Rhames, and Benji Dunn, returned by Simon Pegg, in the hiding from the Impossible Mission Forces, or for short, the IMF. As he's looking for Gabriel, returned by Issei Morales, to stop him from using the entity to stop World War III from happening. And Luther creates a chip with a message called something poison pill, that has a message that we'll hear at the end of the movie. And Ethan and Benji go to Austria to capture Paris, returned by Palm Clementif. And they also take with one of them the guards named Diga with them. And this first piece of action is pretty badass as they break Paris out of Austrian jail. And I like returning to these characters. Ethan goes on a mission to find Gabriel, but who does he find? A couple of guards and a pickpocket Grace, returned by Haley Atwell. As they knock out the two guards, and she doesn't trust Kittredge, returned by Henry Czerny, until they get captured by Gabriel, and Ethan finds a way out of the trap by Gabriel and frees him, as well as Grace, as we're reminded of Ethan's wife, Julia, who was introduced in part 3, and we're again reminded of the previous movies, which is unnecessary unless if this is like the greatest hits of the previous Mission Impossible movies, as a fisherman found the key to the entire entity source code in 2012, which was when part 4 took place. And as complicated as it sounds for any fan of the Mission Impossible movies, this plot feels dense for sure, and there were times I was frustrated by it on both my viewings. I did see this twice. Ethan almost kills himself by biting down his tooth and fakes it by getting his way out, and helps Grace out of captivity and kills a guy off screen in the most gruesome way possible. But this is a PG-13 rated movie for bloody images is one of the reasons, so luckily we don't get to see that on screen. While Gabriel gets away, and we get opening credits 22 minutes into the movie, and we see Gabriel getting away as Dago stops him with Benji in Paris, who wants Gabriel dead, and he traps the IMF agents in a cage and brings them into the entity, where it looks like a casket, and Ethan goes in it to see what will end up happening when Gabriel's plan works and starts World War III. And this mission sounds more complicated than in the previous movies, and I was taking notes in the theater as I can't memorize every single detail that's being said, which was a lot of data dump, and it frustrates me thinking about this plot. Ethan does get out of the entity and runs to Luther to save his life, while he's making Benji team leader and separates them to go on a different mission as Gabriel reaches Luther, as he kills Luther's doctor and sees that he's trapped with a bomb all caged up and has 5 minutes to live. As Ethan gets to Luther and sees Luther is surrounded by a bomb, and he grabs what remains of Luther, which, like I said, is a message that will be said by the end of the movie, which is called the poison pill. And Luther tells Ethan to get out of there and tells him to stop Gabriel, for those will never meet. And Ethan runs as the bomb explodes and Luther dies, and that felt so upsetting because we've been with Luther along with Ethan since the first movie along, and he gets captured and taken to the American government by Jim Phelps' kid, as he calls himself Briggs. And I did not expect John Voight's character from the first movie to come back as a reference, and this is when the greatest hits happen once again from the previous movies, as that was bothering me from the get-go. Ethan is taken to Erica in the CIA, as well as Kittredge and a few others like Sterling, played by Holt McCallany, and Walters, played by Janet McTeer, in a room where a time clock is at, and they talk with Ethan about stopping Gabriel and making World War III never happen. And Ethan asks to go to George H.W. Bush's ship and to trust him one last time. And the dialogue written is a little too much detail. And there's nothing wrong with detail. There's just sometimes I just can't memorize it in my head. Erica gives Ethan 3 days by the clock to kill the entity while countries blow up one after another. And he goes on a helicopter to get to a battleship led by Admiral Neely, which is the George H.W. Bush ship. And Admiral Neely, played by Hannah Waddingham. And what's funny is I just reviewed her in the live-action Lilo and Stitch. But back to this movie. She gets a letter from Erica about Serbia in 1992. And Ethan asks the Admiral to fly him to the submarine, while Benji makes a plan to the team to go on an iced area called St. Matthew Island to pull Ethan out of the ice. And this is a complicated movie for damn sure. Benji and the crew get to St. Matthew Island and get to the house of William Donlow and his wife Tepesa for help to get to the entity, but the bad guys happen to be there while Ethan is on the helicopter and jumps off to the submarine. And some of the crew from the submarine, called the USS Ohio, get him in the submarine as their ship has been smoked, and Ethan almost freezes to death and talks to Captain Bledsoe and asks him to take him to north to a specific coordinates. And Tom Cruise doing these stunts was cool, but sometimes very scary, as there will be two sequences, in particular. And as for now, this plot is dense, and it gets more and more dense the more it goes on. William talks with the bad guys about the key, as they have the coordinates, and tell them they're not enemies, or Grace, and has 1 hour to give them what they need while Ethan is in the USS Ohio. As the crew explains, he'll run out of breath, while Grace helps Tepesa feed the dogs, while William and Benji connect the coordinates of where Ethan is going to meet them at, while they feed the dogs. And Ethan gets into another action sequence against one of the crewmates of the USS Ohio, as Benji, Diga, and Paris beat up on the guards, and the action scenes are pretty damn intense. Tepesa gets the dogs out for a run with Grace on the sled, and they find the coordinates, and Tepesa tells Grace to keep Ethan warm, and Grace goes the rest of the way while Ethan is about to go in the water, as one of the crewmates of the USS Ohio says, "Take care of my suit." And the tense part is coming up, but the acting is somehow a little weak, but it's good, at least. It's better than the first two movies. Ethan is in the water and swims to another submarine as he flips back and forth and is almost killed as he goes past the other submarine and gets to the ship, and the bottom of that was shown in the last movie, as he gets to the ship and is already down and opens his way in and drains the water as people are dead, while thinking about how the crew died, and breaks his way in to find a way to destroy the entity. And the sequence, despite it's complicated, went on a little too long as the ship falls down. And why is this taking so long? Because it's 2 hours and 49 minutes long. But at the same time, though, it's hard to go through all this. I'm not going to lie to you. It really is. Ethan does get a way to destroy the entity and finds a way out of the ship, and gets stuck as he gets out of the ship and has seconds left while swimming without a mask to the coordinates he was supposed to meet Grace at, and Ethan is briefly dead until Grace gets him and gives him CPR, and he can breathe and gets into a thing where he'll be warm again thanks to Benji. And it took some kind of miracle to bring Ethan back alive. Like that, I thought he was dead. But don't forget about the action sequences at the end of the movie. But it did scare me at first, as that was one of those intense stunts that Tom Cruise did, and almost died from it from that point on. Grace brings up how she would trust Ethan with the power of the entity, and Benji comes by with an airplane and picks up Ethan, Grace, and Tepessa. And Ethan officially meets William, and we get memories of the first movie when he dropped the knife 30 years ago, as Benji goes into the plan to stop the entity from creating World War III, and to do it right, and says Grace has to pull a thing with a light on it in a blink of an eye. And we move on to South Africa, where Ethan and the crew get to a place to stop Gabriel, as well as the entity, with less than 30 minutes, while Erica has no choice but her government, led by General Sidney, played by Nick Offerman, telling her to push a button to cause World War III to happen. And this is getting to a point I'm getting frustrated with the movie for pulling this off. Ethan and the crew split up, and eventually Ethan gets Benji and Grace back with the others, as Ethan finds the bomb at the final reckoning, and the crew gets captured by Gabriel's minions, and he says he has a plane to fly away with, and Gabriel forces Ethan to say he wins, and Briggs comes in with a gun pointed at his head, and Kittredge suddenly comes in with his agents, and they have 20 minutes until the bomb explodes, and Gabriel has the upper hand, and gunfire goes off, and Gabriel escapes, and Benji says he'll figure it out, as we see Benji has been shot. And come on, there's no way Benji will die in this movie, as he's been around since part 3. Ethan goes after Gabriel and gets his car flipped over and goes outside to get Gabriel's plane, but gets on the other plane that's red. Anyways, and here comes the second big stunt scene performed by Tom Cruise. As they fly up and Ethan hangs on and slowly gets on the plane that's red, while Grace, Benji, and Paris get to the server, as Grace has the quick hands and Paris helps Benji stay alive, as Benji tells Grace to do what to do in this situation while nodding off a couple of times, while William, Diga, and Tepessa try to deactivate the bomb, and eventually William and Tepessa get to the server room, and Diga finishes off the bomb, as Ethan gets the other pilot off the red plane, and Gabriel's on the yellow plane, and Ethan gets on the red plane, and Gabriel torments him by cutting his wings, while Ethan puts on a helmet and goggles, and these scenes are absolutely super intense. Erica is almost forced, to push the button to start World War III on one of their own towns, as she almost does, but decides not to, while Erica is almost shot, but she is luckily still alive. And General Sidney dies by protecting her, and eventually Ethan jumps off the red ship to get to the yellow ship, or plane, which is where Gabriel is at, and performs some crazy stunts off, while Gabriel tries to stab Ethan, and Ethan grabs the poison pill, and Gabriel falls to his death and crashes on the tail of the plane, as Russia and America almost blow each other up, and Grace is almost done as she watches the light. And I'm like, don't die, Tom Cruise, don't die. Ethan falls down and pulls out a parachute, and it gets burned up, while he has another one, while Grace successfully pulls the thing when the light goes green with a blink of an eye. The power goes back on, and William, Diga, and Tepessa get in the server room, and Erica sees the world is saved and can see her son, who's in the military again. And Ethan hears Luther's message, as he knew he had a way to save the world when he gets respect from the IMF, including Kittredge and Briggs, and he gets to a different country and sees Paris, Diga, Benji, and Grace alive and well, as the climax was good, but it's not my favorite in the series. But where would I rank this one? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 6.9 out of 10. The plot is dense for sure, and did we need to be reminded of the previous movies? Unless if you don't really know those movies very well, not really, as the movie is long enough as it is at 2 hours and 49 minutes. As there were times I was getting stressed out by the plot of the movie, but the scenes with Tom Cruise doing the stunts was cool, but sometimes very scary. Like, I thought he was dead underwater, and the plane scene at the end of the movie, I like returning to these characters as they're watchable, and this feels like the greatest hits of the previous Mission Impossible movies. And there were times it was bothering me from the get-go, but the action sequences were fun and cool, but to be fair, this is not the best Mission Impossible film in my opinion. The dialogue written is a little too much detail, but there's nothing wrong with detail, but I just can't memorize it all in my head. And it is a complicated movie for damn sure. But don't get me wrong, this is a recommendation for this movie. It's just not the best in the series, as I would rather watch 3 through 7 out of this movie, as this is better than the first two movies for sure. And I did like this movie. I would have loved this movie if it wasn't as complicated as it was. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me in returning to the Mission Impossible series. And I don't know if they'll ever make another one based on that ending, but until then, mission accomplished.